The following video is an introduction as well as the first episode of a new series we're starting. We just purchased some property and we're going to be building a home on it, as well as a farm. So I don't know if this is going to be a homestead series or a life series, really. The title of this video is the first thing you should do after purchasing property, and that's amending the soil. Whether you are going to live on it or maybe just keep it for a little while, sell it, right, like maybe an investment or something, amending the soil is always a great option. And we're going to be doing that with wood chips to a 50 by 50, about a 50 by 50 area for an orchard. 23 trees minimum, peaches, apples.
Yes, minimum.
Yeah, we're probably going to do more than that. But, yep, so we're showing you why you should do this, right? Why you should amend the soil, how to do it, and we kind of changed up the method a little bit. When we started filming for this mulching video, this was right when we were starting to mulch, and I didn't have a trailer. We didn't have bedding forks either. We learned like the bedding forks are the way to go.
Lifesaver.
But we were still using this bucket, and it was working really well. You can kind of see whether you'd like a bedding fork or a bucket better, because we really weren't moving the soil too far. So just throwing it all into the bucket, yeah, as you'll see in a little bit here, worked really well. But the bedding fork, we think worked maybe a little bit better on our, it was a little easier on our backs. So anyway, amending the soil, whether that's from adding things like worm castings or compost or mulch in our case, right? Wood chips, and not just wood chips, but you know, a fine blend of a tree, right? Which is, you know, leaves, sticks, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, if it's an investment property, you're going to get that grass looking even more green than it was, right? And it's understated how much nature and like life, like green grass and trees can bring in value to a property. If somebody's coming on, let's say this property, to want to buy a house, right? And they come here and it's lush, fertile, beautiful grass, right? They're gonna go, whoa, you know, this is awesome for my garden house that I'm about to have, or whatever, you know. But if it's, you know, some dead looking arid piece of property, they're gonna go, you know, maybe. Or if it's got a big tree on it, right, they're gonna say, whoa. So amending the soil and maybe planting plants after that. A lot of people would say maybe, oh no, planting a tree is the first thing you need to do on your property. Well, what comes before trees? Soil. You need to amend that soil, and then when you do plant the trees and, you know, things like that, it's going to grow so much better. You're going to shave years off that time it takes to grow a fully mature tree. You know, maybe a couple of years out of the 10 years it takes to get a seedling to produce fruit. So yeah, we're going to go and show you how we were mulching this. And I also want to show you what this soil is like after keeping about 5-6 inches of this wooden flurry, you know, this tree blend we have on it. We'll show you. We'll show you as well what the soil looks like maybe without it. So we'll pick a spot here and kind of show you the depth of the. So right there, that's maybe about 3 or 4 inches, but it hasn't rained here in a very long time, and as you can see, I mean, that's really soft and humid soil. It's a sandy loam and clay mixture, something like that, East Texas. And when it's dry, it's very hard. We'll show you what it's like when it's dry. So here we're going to show you what the soil looked like without that comforting, warm layer of mulch on our soil, right? Like a what do they call it now? What's the blanket called?
Sherpa?
No. The
weighted
blanket, like a weighted
a gravity blanket.
Like a beautiful weighted blanket to cure all of our worms' anxiety. So here, this is what our soil is looking like without any mulch on it. And you saw what it looked like a minute ago. I mean, it was beautiful, soft. This right here, might as well be concrete, right? I mean, you can kind of, yeah, it's hard stuff, and there is sand in there. You know, it's sandy loam. It's relatively good. We used to live in an area with like the black goop. You know, if any of you live in Texas, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That black clay, and you know, we got cracks running through it because it's got a lot of organic matter in it. It's splitting apart. No good. You know, we want our trees to take off and in a couple of years be, you know, rocking and rolling. So that's what this mulch thing's all about. And first we were trucking it in, just in the bed of my truck, a small bed. Then we got a trailer. We're using a trailer, but we talked to a landscaping company who was like trimming trees for the electric company, and they got us all these for free. We did end up paying them a little bit. They didn't ask for that, but you know, we saw them in the neighborhood and we said, hey, y'all need somewhere to dump, you know, and they were like, oh yeah, you know, excited to do it. So they came and dumped all these, and we spread them out in this area here. As you can see, all the like new whiter and like orange wood chips. The darker, more decomposed wood chips were from a place we were getting it, sourcing it locally. But yeah, so you know, easy just like that. Beautiful, beautiful stuff here. And there's a little bit of pines and cedars, which is said to raise pH or lower pH levels, make soils more acidic or whatever, but we're okay with it. Kind of think it's a lot of hoopla anyway, so long as you're not mixing it into the soil. If you're leaving it on top, we should be just fine. But we will be doing pH tests soon, getting everything under control like that. And if it is too acidic, we'll just add some ground seashells or something like that, right? So yeah, we're going to show you how we were doing this, and yeah, let's get to it. Today we're going to be spreading mulch on a piece of property we just bought for a fruit orchard. We already put a thin layer on the area, about a 50 by 50, where we're going to be planting the fruit trees, but we're going to go and keep doing that and getting a real thick layer to prevent the soil from drying out and losing all that moisture that we desperately need. Now the soil, if you'll come down here, I'll show you what we got going on. I believe the soil is sandy loam with probably a little bit of clay as well, and very hard, as you can see. It was very soft when it rained about a week ago, but now it's starting to harden up, and we're really glad we put this thin layer of mulch on here. So we'll go ahead and come around here. Now, out of respect for the people we were getting the mulch from, we didn't film on their property. However, we found somebody locally who was able to source us mulch for free. We came and pick it up anytime we'd like. If any of you try to shovel mulch, you'll know that it's extremely difficult. The wood chips act like friction between each other, and you know, it's hard to get a shovel in there. So what we were doing initially was just grabbing them from the wood chip pile and throwing them into the truck in like handfuls, but very tiresome. It didn't end up working out. So what we ended up doing, and we found this was a very good method, was putting this bucket here up against the wood chips and just kind of throwing them in. And you could fill up the bucket in a couple seconds, then just toss it in the truck. And I want to talk to you a little bit about wood chips. Now, it's no secret. It's no secret due to the Back to Eden movement and permaculture and everything that wood chips are great for the garden. In some instances, and when we were grabbing our wood chips, we made sure to pay very close attention to what type of wood chips we were throwing into the truck. Obviously, you want a variety when you're grabbing wood chips. You want to get some sticks in there, some leaves, and some ground up wood. What that does is gives you a more diverse mineral composition in your wood chips, and an overall balanced compost too when everything decomposes. So right now we're mulching with the wood chips, but in a year or two, all this will eventually probably turn into compost and help the soil gain nutrients. Another thing as well that's talked about in depth is the microorganisms inside of this, in what people will call like a fungal dominated compost. Not only does it have all types of mycelium and different types of fungus, but the bacteria that are breaking down this wood, it helps to have wood chips from your area, right? Because the microbiology in the soil knows how to break down cedars, for instance, if you have cedars all around in your area. Now, if you were bringing in pine trees somewhere that, let's say pine trees didn't grow, your soil might have a difficult time breaking those pine trees down. When we were grabbing our wood chips, we were digging down into the heart of the wood chip pile, and what that was doing was, one, getting us like somewhat decomposed wood chips already, and that's speeding up our time, right? We're grabbing things that are already a little bit decomposed, so it's going to help our soil immediately versus the stuff on top that's not decomposed. Another thing you can see, there was a lot of biology going on in this soil. See, the leaf is it's getting moldy and everything. That's the mycelium in there breaking down these leaves and wood chips and everything. As well as when it's hot inside of the soil or the wood chip mound, it may be killing off a lot of that fungus, but it's also killing off a lot of the bugs and things like termites. You might hear, right, people saying, don't put wood chips in your garden, the termites. Well, if you dig down to that real hot soil, you won't have any termites there. Or grub worms. We found some grub worms, and we definitely don't want to be mulching our soil with grub worms. So if you dig down really deep in there and get that hot stuff, or even like deep and get the fungal dominated stuff, it's also going to be more nutrient dense than not broken down wood chips. Because you got to think, things shrink when they're being decomposed, and you may notice that when you go buy a bag of soil and put it, like from Home Depot or something, right? You go in to put it in your garden, and then the next year it's way down, it's way lower. You think, what happened? Well, it wasn't properly decomposed, so once it was decomposed, it shrunk down. If you're getting stuff that's already shrunk down, you're making, what, 1 truckload full equivalent to 2 truckloads full of the non-decomposed stuff. So you want to get stuff that's decomposed, and you can see here how brown that is, and, it's the good stuff. It's really hard and dense, and we're getting more for our money, essentially, more bang for our buck. So what we've been doing is just driving the truck up, grabbing some handfuls, and just throwing them over our orchard. Well, soon to be orchard. And this is in preparation for the winter time when we're going to be planting all these trees. So we're really rushing here and trying to get this stuff covered as fast as possible. And maybe even sprinkle some azomite or something along those lines, right, to remineralize this area. The soil here is pretty fertile. There's a lot of things that are growing, especially wildflowers. This whole area was one big wildflower patch when we bought the property, but had to mow it over so we could walk in here and, be able to do things like this. So we might be able to show you a picture of that as well. I think we do have some pictures of that, and we'll put it up now. Anyway, so we're going to go ahead and show you this orchard and this area we got here. If you're in a time crunch for putting on these wood chips, it's best to do a light coating first and then go around and put a deeper coat of the mulch. That's what we did, and we think it turned out great. We're doing 12-foot spacing between each of the trees, and when you're doing something like an orchard, it's best to take the sun into consideration when you're doing it. So we know that we're going to have our very big trees back here on the north side of the property, and what that's going to do is allow them to not shade out any other of the smaller trees. So we're going to go bigger to smaller, and also we'll probably put the biggest trees over there in that very back corner, and make it to where the biggest are over there, and then it maybe goes to the smaller over here. Because in the wintertime, the sun is over towards the south side of the property, so it's going to be coming in at an angle, and we don't want the sun to not be able to reach those back areas. So that was our thinking behind it, and we're probably going to go with like semi-dwarf fruit trees. I think the 12-foot spacing will be perfect for that, so long as we stay on top of pruning them. So anyway, yeah, we're going to show you some clips as well of when we were putting this first layer of mulch on. The audio was bad, so that's why we didn't start off with that, but yeah, let's get to it. And the goal is just to make sure that there's no grass showing. That's kind of how we're using, it's what we're going by in terms of getting an even coat. So if I'm seeing any grass, I'm just covering it with the mulch. Over time and after years and years of doing this, all you're doing is just building up that topsoil that's been eroded over 200 years of this being farmland, probably to grow cotton, being that we're in Texas. It's likely that 100, 200 years ago, that's exactly what this land was just a big cotton field. Or maybe, corn or something, but that was the cash crop back in the day, so. Yeah, and they'd plant it over and over and over again. They wouldn't put anything back in the soil, just maybe, with the, maybe did a crop rotation, but it's unlikely. Being that there's just so much land in Texas, just use the land till it's used up and then move on to the next patch or what have you. And I heard this from another YouTube video and thought it was very interesting. We don't get too bad of frosts in Texas, but whenever it does frost, this acts like an insulation layer for the soil and allows the soil to not get too cold. So essentially all the worms will come into this area of soil instead of being over there because it's cold, right? So you're creating a safe haven for worms, which is really what we want. It'd be nice to have some worms out here. And then after you have an even enough coat and you're not seeing any grass, then you just go ahead and move the truck up and you keep on going. Pulled up a little bit too far, but that's all right. A lot of you may be saying, well, why don't you just use your tractor to spread it around? Or, we don't have any of that. We don't have those luxuries. So we're doing it old-fashioned, right? Old school. Grabbing it and throwing it. If we had the money for a tractor or something like that to spread it, we would. But we're going low budget on the Homestead build. And we're going to take you along throughout the entire adventure. Building and amending the soil, and even applying a bit of a scientific method to our garden. In that it's difficult to. A lot of people just do things because that's what they've been told to do, rather than thinking about it and applying logic to it. So we're going to try to do that in our garden, and use a bit of holistic farming, if you will. For instance, like planting a bare root tree into the ground in the winter, which is what we're going to end up doing. But we're also going to sow seeds of that same type of fruit, let's say like a peach, into the ground as well. And we're going to monitor it over the years and see which one actually grows faster, the seed or the bare root tree. Because I have a feeling that a seed that doesn't get moved and is directly in the soil and stays there is going to grow faster in the long term and grow healthier and live longer than a bare root tree. But we're going to see, right? You don't see a lot of that on YouTube being tested. As well as like people putting their seeds in the freezer to, activate the seed or whatever, instead of letting it sit there in the soil in the winter. I think that, personally, I think that might have an effect on the chill hours of the fruit tree or whatever. It might mess up that tree's internal clock, or if you will. So different weird things like that. We're gonna try to explore all of these different theories here, and yeah, just teach you a thing or two. once you get a good rhythm, you can really cover some ground fast. But another thing back on the microbiology of the soil. The microbiology of the soil currently is for like a grassland, right? A bit of like a prairie. We're turning it into a forest essentially by planting all these trees. We're planning on putting at minimum about 23 trees into this orchard. So with a microbiology that is for a grassland or a prairie, right? Decomposing those types of things, the trees might not grow as good. So by putting this mulch and all these decomposing tree debris, we should be able to change that microbiology to a forest. So the plants, when they get here, they'll know exactly what to do, right? And they'll say, oh, this is home, not like, oh, this is foreign territory. Also, what you have to think about is emulating nature. That's a big part of gardening, and for many of you who have the wisdom and experience of many years of gardening, you'll know that emulating nature is a really great way to go about it, right? If a tree under it has a bunch of leaves and twigs in a forest, you want to emulate that into your own garden, because that's going to ultimately make the tree very happy. And you can see examples of that all over the place, right? With even pruning, maybe. In the fall when it's really windy, or in the spring when it's really windy, it might break off leaves and stimulate growth for the tree. Well, as a gardener, you're kind of emulating nature by pruning the tree a little bit, right? Because it does help. So, things to think about.